Hi, I'm Ron Hogan, and welcome to the Handsell. My guest today is Jenny Davidson. She's the author of several novels. Her most recent is called The Magic Circle, and it's published by New Harvest. And we're here at Book Culture, just across the street from Columbia University, which actually kind of ties into what I wanted to talk to you about, which is that one of the key themes of this novel is live-action role-playing, or LARPing, on the Columbia University campus. And I wanted to talk about how that became a story theme for you.
It's a great question. I am ashamed to confess that I am not a gamer myself. I know it from having read obsessively about it and from having watched lots of documentaries rather than from playing games. But my working title for The Magic Circle was The Bacchae on Morningside Heights. And the two crucial elements that really crashed together to make this book were a long-standing obsession with the Euripides play The Bacchae, which is really a play about what happens when a stranger comes to town and people who have previously been very sane and rational and in command of what they're doing suddenly lose that aspect of themselves. So, long-standing obsession with the Bacchae. And I've also been living in Morningside Heights since the year 2000. I've been teaching at Columbia for over a decade, and all the time that I've spent sort of wandering the streets of this neighborhood, looking at buildings, thinking about it, made me really want to write a book that would capture some of the very unusual feel of this little community.
And as you talk about in the book itself, or the characters talk about, the idea of a live-action role-playing game creates this kind of like unique space in which something like that kind of deranging process that you described can take place.
Yes. I'm always torn. I like fantasy novels. I read a lot of novels that have real magic in them. But when I was writing this novel, it did not seem to me that I could write a novel that had Harry Potter-style magic wands and magic spells. I do, though, think that there are other kinds of disruption to the normal kinds of sanity and rationality that we have. So I'm certainly still a person who, every time I go for a run in Riverside Park as I'm running south, I look at the avenue of trees and I think, really, this should be like Narnia. I should be able to just run straight down this and I would be coming out into another universe. So this neighborhood is full of really beautiful bits of landscaping. Lots of them, those great 19th century parks that are very well designed to give you that feel.
Well, I think that air of the uncanny and the unsettling will work out really well with the list that we've been given to recommend for today. For those of you who don't know, the way the Handsell works is that people send me lists of books that they've enjoyed reading, and then me and my guest stars try to come up with books that they would like. Today's list comes from Dana in Chicago, and the three books that she told us that she enjoyed were Will Lavender's Dominance, The Man in the Empty Suit by Sean Ferrell, and Cemetery Girl by David Bell. And again, these are three books that have a very unsettling, creepy sort of atmosphere to them. And I'm really interested to hear about the books that you came up with as a recommendation for Dana.
Yeah, I had a couple suggestions. I love this list. I read a couple of the books on it. I thoroughly enjoyed them. And I read a lot of crime fiction, but I know some people who read crime fiction really will prefer it straight and for it not to have those elements of the uncanny. I like it eclectically with whatever stuff is going to make it creepier and more haunting, and I thought that this list was three very strong selections in terms of open-mindedness about mixing together elements of different genres. So the first book that I would recommend to Dana is Ben Winter's novel, The Last Policeman. It's really, it's written as, and it's built on the chassis of a kind of police procedural, private investigator, very nice, aesthetically appealing, kind of a noir model, but the book begins with the premise that an asteroid is about to destroy the Earth, and everybody knows that and knows that they have a very fixed amount of time left. So The Last Policeman, the title of the book, the book is really an idea-driven novel about what you do if you have devoted your life to law enforcement and you've been used to working with a lot of other people who cared about the laws, and you're suddenly in this world where law has no meaning whatsoever. So that's a book that, in some of the same ways as the ones on this list, would seem to me to combine both the straight crime fiction appeal with also this uncanny, more brain teaser of a premise.
Yeah, I loved The Last Policeman. You know, one of the things I loved about that story is you know, there's this idea that noir fiction, it always takes place in a world that is kind of run down and corrupt and on the edge of deterioration. And this is, in that sense, it's kind of the perfect noir
It takes
environment.
it literally and
Yeah,
kind of
it's
ups
like,
the ante. The world is literally about to come to an end.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, in that kind of setting, it's like, you know, the ethical and moral decisions you make take on an extra dimension to them. And the protagonist of that novel really embodies that in a very powerful way. It's like, this is a dedicated policeman who, you know, it doesn't matter if the world is going to end in less than a year. He's got a case to solve, and he's going to work hard to see it through.
He has a true vocation to an unusual degree in a world where most people have really lost very much sense of themselves with this impending catastrophe.
And so what was the other book that you
Yeah,
loved?
I did have one other series to recommend. This is on a slightly more lighthearted note. Ben Aronovich's books. I think the first one is called Midnight in Soho. I'm not sure that that's the exact title, but at any rate, these are a very appealing series. Again, the protagonist starts out as a police constable in the real, regular British police, but he has an encounter with the uncanny in the very opening scene of the first novel in the series that ends up being his invitation into a whole secret world of occult London, where there is a separate law enforcement infrastructure that's designed exactly to police these ghosts and other magical entities that are as likely to be committing crimes and disrupting public safety as more obvious kinds of criminals. So the books are very well written with a really humorous, appealing voice, and I think Dana would enjoy them.
And the book that I came up with is also kind of very dark and creepy. But, the supernatural elements may or may not be there. There's an air of deliberate ambiguity to it. The book is called The House of Rumour by a British novelist called Jake Arnott. And one of the things I loved about this is that it's this sort of like dark underhistory of the 20th century that kind of coalesces around this idea, which is actually more than an idea. There is a historical accuracy to it, that during the Second World War, Ian Fleming, who was in British military intelligence, was in contact with the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, and they were working on a plan to sort of do this, what they call black propaganda, aimed at undermining the Germans' will to fight the war. And from there, it kind of spins into this idea that maybe that was responsible for Rudy Hess fleeing Germany and defecting to the British and what was going on there. But then it snowballs even further, and as I say, it kind of takes on the bulk of the later half of the 20th century so that it incorporates L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. It starts working in references to Jonestown. There are characters who are sort of analogous to Philip K. Dick and some of the other science fiction writers of the period. And the way that he puts all this, that Arnott kind of sort of blends all this into, I guess, like a dark history or a secret history, is really kind of compelling in a multiple voice format.
It's a hugely appealing read. It's a book that, as we describe it, will sound possibly a little difficult or experimental, but it is a true page-turner. I couldn't put it down. I think it's incredibly appealingly well-written, as well as doing all the stuff that you talked about.
Yeah, it's written in a number of different voices so that there's like a number of different facets to this puzzle. And the way that he ends up putting them together, as you say, I mean, I would end one section and right away I'd want to be like, well, okay, how's this next section going to fit into it, and how's it going to work? So I would definitely encourage Dana from Chicago to check that out, and I would encourage a bunch of you to check that out as well. And certainly The Last Policeman I can personally endorse as well, and I've always wanted to
Can I make one other
Yeah,
recommendation?
Sure.
You know, the writer who I have been most delighted to discover, I think, over the last couple of years, who's writing crime fiction, is Tana French. I think all of her books are super. The most recent one, Broken Harbor, doesn't have the kind of explicitly uncanny elements that perhaps we've been talking about here, but it's truly one of the most compelling crime novels that I've read in the last 10 years. And if Dana has not already read Tana French, I would strongly recommend those books too.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of great things about Tana French as well from a number of readers, so we will add that to the list. So those are some great recommendations for you, Dana, and for you all out there. And if you want to submit your own recommendations, you can go to thehandsell.com/ask and tell me 3 to 5 books that you've enjoyed. And with any luck, we'll hopefully be giving you some recommendations based on that list on a future episode of The Handsell. I'm Ron Hogan. This is Jenny Davidson. And from Book Culture in Morningside Heights, have a good day.